Welcome to the DX Today podcast, where you get facts, not hype. And welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is to take your comprehensive source material. And this time, it's a really intense, detailed analysis of the 2025 AI implementation landscape and just pull out the actionable, essential insights that you need.
Yeah, because the field has become incredibly crowded and, frankly, a bit frustrating for a lot of people.
For sure. We are absolutely moving past the glossy headlines and, the optimistic vendor demos that really dominated the last couple of years.
We really are. We're drilling down into the operational balance sheet now.
Okay, so let's unpack this right away. Today, we're focusing squarely on the state of artificial intelligence implementation, and specifically generative AI as it exists right now in 2025. We're moving on from the theory, from the hype cycle, and we are getting into the cold, hard operational reality facing, well, everyone from the CIO to the CFO globally.
And that transition you're highlighting, it's not just some industry trend, it's a financial mandate.
And mandate.
Yes. The market is shifting, and abruptly, from what everyone was calling the learning phase.
Right, where you had those innovation funds and could sort of play around with the tech.
Exactly. You had discretionary funds to experiment. Now we are firmly in what the sources are calling the earning phase.
The earning phase. So the CFO's office is now in charge.
Firmly in control. AI investments are no longer these fun little budget lines. They're being treated like core capital expenditure. They have to defend themselves with the same rigor, the same measurable ROI as, building a new factory or acquiring a major asset.
And that new financial rigor, that's precisely where the central conflict is showing up, isn't it? It's exposing all these fault lines we've been tracking. The sources, they keep calling it a bifurcated reality. On one side, you have this massive investment, all this enthusiasm. On the other, a brutal demand for operational accountability.
And the fundamental question now, the one that's on every board's agenda, is, and I'm quoting here, where's the value?
Right, where is the value? So we're dissecting the mechanisms that separate the successful few from, well, the struggling majority.
And what's so fascinating here is that the distribution of success, it's not just uneven. It's not a bell curve. It follows a strict power law.
A power law. So the winners are taking pretty much everything.
Almost all of it. So we are looking for the common traits, the mechanisms that separate this incredibly small but powerful group, the elite 6% of leaders who are driving substantiated EBIT impacts of 5% or more, from the vast majority who are just stalled out.
So our mission today is clear then. We're looking beyond just technical feasibility. This is about managerial and operational success. What are the key elements we need to cover to give our listener that kind of forensic view?
Okay, our goal has to be comprehensive. First, we have to analyze this GenAI divide you mentioned. Then, we really need to scrutinize the systemic failure that the industry is calling pilot purgatory. It's costing organizations billions. And crucially, we have to dedicate serious time to understanding the human, the governance, and the data infrastructure barriers that are stalling a shocking 95% of initiatives.
So this deep dive is essentially a financial and operational forensic accounting of the industry's actual progress, not the aspirational marketing pitch.
Exactly. We're looking at what's really happening on the ground.
All right, let's start with that big picture then, the macro state of adoption. Because the high-level metrics, they immediately create this fascinating paradox that really defines the 2025 landscape.
They really do.
On the surface, it looks like the barrier to access for AI tools is completely solved. I mean, everyone has their hands on the gear now.
Oh, absolutely. The data is unequivocal on access. By late 2025, you've got a robust 78% of organizations using AI in at least one business function.
And that's a huge jump from 55% back in 2023.
A massive jump. And nearly 90% of global companies are now in some stage of usage or exploration. So, the models are downloaded, the Copilot licenses are provisioned, the tool is broadly available to just about every knowledge worker out there.
But, and this is, the paradox availability doesn't equal transformation, does it? This is the critical distinction you, our listener, really need to grasp, the usage versus utility paradox. Can you define that crucial difference for us?
Sure. Usage, as the data shows, is just the availability and the individual application of the tool.
Yeah.
Think ChatGPT Enterprise, Copilot, Jasper, you know it. The employee uses it to do their existing job a little bit faster.
Okay, so that's usage. What's utility?
Utility, on the other hand, that requires a fundamental strategic shift. It's a reconfiguration of core business processes to leverage this probabilistic intelligence at scale across the entire organization.
So it means changing the assembly line, not just giving one worker a better wrench.
That's the perfect analogy. And the problem is this 39-point gap in what the sources are calling the transformation deficit.
And the numbers on that deficit are just stark. You've got 72% of organizations using GenAI regularly, but only 33% have scaled programs beyond just isolated individual activity.
Right. And that 39-point difference, that gap, it shows that AI is a widespread individual tool, for sure. But it is not yet a widespread systemic change agent. The majority of companies are completely stuck at the desk level.
And that failure to move from the desk to the system, that dictates the entire nature of current adoption, doesn't it?
It dictates everything. It means the focus is overwhelmingly on what we call productivity augmentation.
So things like summarizing long emails, drafting some basic marketing copy.
Exactly. Generating preliminary code snippets, writing first drafts of internal memos. And look, these are all valuable tasks that improve individual efficiency. There's no doubt about that.
But, and this is the key point, they're additive, not transformative.
Precisely. They don't fundamentally alter the unit economics or the supply chain or the business model of the firm. You've made one employee 10% faster, but you haven't figured out how to capture that saved capacity into a system that yields macro value for the entire company.
Which leads us directly to the most sobering reality in all of our source material, which is pilot purgatory. We've all heard the phrase, but the sheer scale of the failure rate here is, well, it's not just stunning, it's a massive financial black hole.
Pilot purgatory is the perfect term for it because it defines that state of being stuck. It's the inability to move a successful, technically functional proof of concept, a POC, into a reliable, governed, and scalable production environment.
So in the controlled sandbox, the lab, everything runs perfectly.
Lawlessly. But the moment you expose it to the real world of messy, chaotic enterprise data, it just breaks. Or it performs so unreliably, it's useless.
And when you say breaks, we need to be crystal clear about the financial devastation here. What is the failure rate we are truly talking about?
The industry analysis suggests a jaw-dropping failure rate. Approximately 95% of AI POCs fail to reach production deployment.
95.
Think about that. You are looking at a 1 in 20 chance of successfully getting your model out of the lab and into the hands of, say, 10,000 employees reliably. 5% of projects actually deliver scale.
Wow.
The other 95% are just stuck, or worse, they're abandoned entirely.
That's not just a technical inefficiency. That is financial destruction on a scale that has to be dictating executive risk appetite right now. That 95% failure rate represents billions of dollars poured into innovation teams that never, ever deliver.
It does. The sources estimate this widespread abandonment represents an astonishing $30 to $40 billion in enterprise investment that is currently yielding zero measurable financial return.
30 to 40 billion with a B.
With a B. Just think about that for a moment. This is why we've definitively shifted from the learning phase to the earning phase. Every CFO is now looking at that $30, $40 billion black hole and demanding accountability before they approve the next wave of spending.
And the really crucial insight here, which I think challenges a lot of conventional wisdom, is why they fail. It's almost never the core algorithm or the code itself, is it? The model works just fine in theory.
Exactly. The failure occurs when these fragile prototypes are exposed to the high-volume, chaotic, unstructured enterprise data that we're going to talk about in more detail later.
Okay.
When these organizations fail, the reasons they cite are almost entirely non-technical or, infrastructural. Things like unclear business value from the outset, the inability to govern the model's outputs effectively.
The dreaded hallucinations that end up costing a fortune.
The very costly hallucinations.
Yeah.
And the foundational lack of AI-ready data and proper deployment pipelines.
So the technology is only guilty of exposing the organizational and data weaknesses that were already there to begin with.
Precisely. AI is a mirror. It's just reflecting the quality of your operational foundation. If your data is a mess, the AI will be a very expensive, very fast, hallucinating mess. And the market is demanding that executives stop treating AI as, some kind of magic pixie dust and start treating it as industrial infrastructure.
In this purgatory state, it often leads to just outright cancellation. I saw Gartner reinforces this, forecasting that 30% of all GenAI projects that are active in 2025 will be abandoned entirely after the POC phase.
That's right. So purgatory isn't a holding pattern. It's a slow, resource-draining march toward cancellation as that budget pressure just mounts and mounts.
So this is the critical point for you, the listener, to absorb them. If the technology works fine in the lab, why is the organization so uniquely unprepared for the scaling phase?
And the answer is always the same. It's governance, it's data quality, and it's infrastructure. It's all the boring, unglamorous, but absolutely necessary parts of the job that require real managerial courage and committed capital expenditure. If you skimp on the infrastructure, the model will never leave the pilot stage, period.
That distinction between the successful few and the struggling many leads us directly into the next section, the GenAI Divide. You mentioned before that market success follows a strict power law distribution. The winners take almost everything. Let's really dissect this power law.
Indeed. You have the high performers, that elite 6% at the very top.
Right.
They're the winners who have successfully crossed that pilot purgatory chasm.
And then you have the laggards.
The laggards, the vast majority. The bottom 60 to 70% of organizations who are just floundering below, completely stuck in that transformation deficit we talked about. And the competitive gap between them is widening every single day.
Okay, let's look closer at those high performers. I mean, they are defining the competitive advantage for the next decade, and their results are just staggering compared to the industry average.
These are the organizations that have fundamentally solved the scaling and the governance problem. And as a result, they attribute more than 5% of their enterprise-wide EBIT directly to their AI initiatives.
And this isn't SUST accounting, right? Not just estimated time savings.
No, this is hard, measurable P&L impact. Straight to the bottom line. And as a result, their ROI is massive. They're reaching as high as 10.3x returns on their AI investments.
10 times return that's astonishing. But how are they achieving that? What are they focused on? Because it sounds like their entire objective is strategically different from the majority.
It is entirely different. For that elite 6%, the primary objective is innovation and revenue growth. That's what we called the ceiling earlier. They are not focused on shaving pennies off of existing back-office processes.
They're fundamentally redesigning things.
They're redesigning and re-engineering entire workflows to create new value, new data-driven products, or entirely new services that didn't exist before.
Can you give us some concrete examples of what that innovation and revenue growth really looks like in practice? I mean, beyond just saying hyper-personalized marketing, how does AI directly lead to a 10.3x return?
Sure. Think about precision forecasting in retail. Using GenAI to synthesize thousands of real-time signals, social media sentiment, weather patterns, competitor promotions, to dynamically adjust inventory and pricing on an hourly basis.
Which cuts spoilage and maximizes margins in real time.
Exactly. Or consider accelerated R&D in pharmaceuticals. We're seeing models generate and screen thousands of novel molecular compounds in a matter of days. That drastically reduces the cost and the time of that initial research phase.
So it accelerates the time to market for a high-value product.
Right. That is transformation.
Yeah.
It's using AI to create new capabilities that simply were not possible before. That's the lever that gets you to a 10.3x return.
Okay, so now let's turn to the other side of that chasm, the laggards. This is the struggling majority, the bottom 60 to 70% of organizations who are, for all intents and purposes, still just paying the AI tax.
Their reality, and this is according to some pretty blunt BCG research, is that 60% of them are reaping hardly any material value.
Hardly any.
They're stuck. They're completely unable to aggregate those micro-efficiencies we talked about, the save minutes here and there, into any kind of macro financial result for the company.
Okay, and this is where I want to challenge the premise a little bit. Their approach is defensive. Their primary objective is efficiency and cost reduction. But isn't efficiency just good business? Shouldn't you fix the floor before you start aiming for the ceiling? Why are the sources so critical of the laggards focused on cost reduction?
That's a fair question. But the sources aren't criticizing the idea of efficiency itself. They're criticizing the approach to achieving it. Laggards are just attempting to bolt AI onto existing, often broken processes.
So they're focusing on automating existing processes.
Exactly. They might use AI to automate, say, a claims form submission. But if the original claims process was slow, bureaucratic, and required 6 different manual sign-offs, the AI just automates the very first step of a fundamentally broken workflow.
So they haven't used AI as a catalyst to rethink the whole thing.
They haven't. They didn't use AI to redesign that 6-step manual process into a single automated compliant flow.
So they're essentially treating AI as just a glorified RPA, a robotic process automation tool, rather than a chance to really rethink the structure of their work.
Precisely. And so they're achieving some marginal gains, but those gains just don't scale. And the result of that defensive, narrow focus, it's negligible or, often completely unmeasured EBIT impact. Frequently, it's zero or even negative ROI.
So for these organizations, AI remains a non-strategic cost center. It's a tax they pay to vendors for expensive software licenses that promise intelligence, but really only deliver these marginal efficiency gains that are immediately consumed somewhere else in the organization.
You got it.
The truly frightening part of this GenAI divide, if you're a laggard, has to be the widening gap. This isn't a static divide, is it? It's an expanding competitive moat.
That's right. And the compounding competitive advantage is fierce and it is relentless. The leaders who have successfully generated these significant efficiencies and profits from their AI systems, that 10.3x return, they take that excess capital and they immediately reinvest it.
Where does that money go?
It goes into better infrastructure, into dedicated MLOps teams, into further data acquisition, and into continuous model refinement. This makes their models smarter, their outcomes more reliable, and their processes faster.
Meanwhile, the laggards, having achieved no material value or ROI, can't afford that reinvestment cycle.
And so the gap just expands very quickly, creating a competitive moat that will be incredibly difficult to cross in the next 3 to 5 years. If you don't succeed now, catching up later becomes exponentially more expensive.
So the story of who is succeeding is completely counterintuitive. It really flies in the face of what we all assumed a few years ago. Conventional wisdom said the largest corporations, the ones with infinite budgets and massive data lakes, they would win. But the sources are suggesting something else entirely. Complexity is the inhibitor, not budget.
This is where the structural dynamics become one of the most important takeaways for you, the listener. The mid-market, we're talking to firms with, say, $100 million to $1 billion in revenue, is demonstrating stunning agility. Why? Because paradoxically, they're less complex. They're achieving a rapid velocity where the giants are just stuck in the mud.
Okay, how rapid are we talking here? And why should a listener at a big enterprise pay attention to what these mid-market players are doing?
The top mid-market performers are achieving average timelines of just 90 days from pilot to full implementation.
90 days.
90 days. So if you are a global enterprise and it's taking you 9 months to deploy a successful POC, that 90-day turnaround from your mid-market competitor is an existential threat. They are deploying, learning, refining, and redeploying 3 times before the giant even gets approval to go live once.
Let's break down the structural factors driving that unbelievable agility. It boils down to organization, decision-making, and technical debt, right?
Correct. First, you have flatter decision hierarchies. The distance between the CIO, the business unit head, and the CEO is just short. This lets them avoid the crippling decision paralysis that's so common in large firms, where every strategic pivot requires multiple layers of review, compliance checks, and budget approval from competing committees.
So a mid-market leader can greenlight a pivot in a 30-minute meeting.
Exactly.
And the technical foundation itself is inherently cleaner, which has to be a massive unspoken advantage.
It's a huge advantage. They generally have less technical debt. They aren't burdened by these sprawling, ossified mainframe architectures and decades-old legacy systems that define global banks or telecoms or insurance giants.
Right.
Integrating a modern API-based AI agent into a relatively modern cloud ERP system is infinitely faster than fighting decades of COBOL code and complex siloed data structures.
And we can't forget the fundamental business driver here, existential pressure.
Yes, the existential pressure is a critical accelerant. For the mid-market, AI isn't a luxury item. It's an existential mechanism to compete with the giants who have superior distribution and deeper pockets.
So that necessity drives them to be pragmatic.
Very pragmatic. They adopt good enough off-the-shelf solutions that solve immediate business problems rather than pursuing these bespoke, perfectionist, 6-month-long internal builds that might just end up in pilot purgatory anyway. And this pragmatism has fueled a major adoption surge. GenAI use in the middle market surged to 91% in 2025, with 1 in 4 of those firms fully integrated into core operations.
Okay, now let's contrast that agility with the enterprise scale trap. These large organizations, $5 billion plus in revenue, they have the massive resources, but the lowest rates of pilot to scale conversion. You said often taking 9+ months to reach production. Scale itself is the pathology.
It is a self-inflicted wound of complexity. The sheer size and fragmentation of these companies generate 3 debilitating pathologies. The first one is pilot sprawl.
Define pilot sprawl for us. How does that actively inhibit scale?
You see this everywhere in Fortune 500 companies. It's fragmentation. You have dozens, maybe hundreds, of disconnected AI pilots running simultaneously across every single business unit: HR, marketing, R&D, legal, finance.
But with no shared infrastructure?
No shared infrastructure,
Yeah.
no central learning, and, most critically, no common data governance. Each team is using a different vendor, a different LLM, a different data silo. It doesn't just dilute resources, it prevents the accumulation of institutional knowledge about what actually works and what fails in a production environment. It is innovation without collaboration.
And then you layer on top of that the necessary but agonizing governance gridlock.
Large enterprises operate with huge systemic risk profiles. You've got data privacy mandates like GDPR, specific sovereign AI requirements in different regions, brand reputation to protect, and intense regulatory scrutiny. All of that creates massive friction.
So that 2-week technical build we saw in the mid-market.
Can easily take 6 months just to clear legal and compliance review in a large enterprise, and that's a best-case scenario.
But why does the legal review take so long? What exactly are they auditing that just destroys velocity like that?
It's intense rigor, and it's necessary. They're auditing the entire pipeline. Legal and compliance have to ensure that the model's training data didn't accidentally include restricted client IP or proprietary trade secrets. They have to stress test the RA pipeline to ensure the model cannot cite restricted client data if asked by an employee without the correct permissions.
And if the agent is autonomous?
Then they have to prove the system has auditable guardrails.
Yeah.
This rigor is essential to avoid billion-dollar lawsuits, but it absolutely destroys the ability to move quickly.
And the final hurdle, the so-called last mile, is that integration complexity.
The last mile is exponentially harder for the giants. Connecting the shiny new AI model to the decade-old system of record, the core transactional databases requires navigating firewalls, identity management systems that don't talk to each other, and these deeply disparate data silos spread all across the globe.
So the internal IT team is fighting decades of their own infrastructure.
Exactly. It makes rapid, robust integration nearly impossible. The model might be great, but if it can't reliably access the data and then write back to the system of record, it's useless at scale.
So if the mid-market is moving fast and the enterprise is stuck, what's the mechanism enabling that acceleration? The sources point pretty clearly to managed service providers, or MSPs, as the critical differentiator.
This is a crucial strategic insight for anyone in the mid-market. Mid-sized firms are pragmatic buyers of outcomes. They rely strategically on MSPs, often consuming the capability as AI as a service.
And this allows them to bypass the need to hire that scarce, expensive internal AI talent.
The very talent that is driving up labor costs across the entire industry. Yes.
And the data supports this outsourcing strategy pretty dramatically. It seems almost counterintuitive that using external partners leads to a better internal deployment.
It speaks volumes about the complexity of moving from POC to production. The data shows projects involving external partners see twice the success rate, 66%, compared to purely internal builds, 33%.
That's the implementation advantage.
It is. The MSP doesn't waste time on first-time edge cases. They have repeatable, industrialized experience. They've already deployed Copilot or a custom GenAI agent for 50 other clients. They've already solved the integration issues, the security configurations, and the subtle data formatting problems that would stall an internal IT team for months. They can immediately translate that experience into accelerated delivery for their next client.
Okay, let's talk about the money. The economic equation substantiating ROI. This brings us right back to the mandate of the CFO. The ROI landscape is just sharply divided. We know 95% are struggling, but those top performers, they justify the hype with those impressive 10.3x returns. This is why the strategic shift in value generation is really the story of 2025.
The business case has matured dramatically. Back in 2023, early 2024, the primary justification, what we're calling the floor, was almost entirely about cost avoidance and individual efficiency.
Right.
Now, in 2025, the focus has shifted decisively to the ceiling, growth and innovation. That's where that elite 6% is focused.
But the floor is still important, though, isn't it? I mean, efficiency is still the objective for 80% of organizations, and those micro gains are real.
They are very real, and they provide the foundational justification for the investment. The average knowledge worker who's using AI saves about 2.5 hours per day.
Which is significant.
It's huge. If you're a massive organization with 10,000 knowledge workers, that saved capacity is a huge return on potential. The problem, as we've discussed, is converting that individual potential into macro-organizational results.
But the truly transformative returns, that 10.3x number, that's strictly at the ceiling.
Absolutely. The high performers are using AI not just to draft emails faster, but to fundamentally redesign their product lines, to accelerate R&D cycles by orders of magnitude, and to execute hyper-personalized marketing at an unprecedented scale. The data shows companies that successfully scale AI achieve 1.5 times higher revenue growth and 1.6 times greater shareholder returns than their peers. The focus is squarely on revenue generation, not just marginal operational savings.
But despite all these measurable micro efficiencies, faster coding, quicker email summaries, better first drafts, you noted this measurement challenge. For the majority, these individual gains just aren't aggregating up to the P&L statement. Why is that?
This is the absolute crux of the transformation deficit. Only 39% of organizations report any enterprise-level financial impact.
Only 39%.
Right, so for the other 61%, they know their employees are saving 2.5 hours a day at the desk level, but the organization hasn't figured out two critical things. First, how to reliably measure that saved time in terms of dollars, and second, how to reallocate that saved capacity into revenue-generating activities.
So if that engineer who saved 2.5 hours just spends those 2.5 hours surfing the web, you've paid for a license and you've gotten zero return.
Zero return.
This reminds me so acutely of that classical economic concept, the Jevons paradox. It was based on 19th century coal consumption, but it feels highly relevant here.
It is the perfect analogy for the current AI trap. The Jevons paradox suggests that increased efficiency in using a resource often leads to increased consumption of that resource, rather than cost savings.
Okay, so give me the AI version.
If your IT department uses GenAI to code 30% faster, they don't reduce their staffing budget. They just start 30% more projects. This increases the licensing costs of their tools, it increases their cloud compute spend, and it expands the scope of their work. You've increased velocity, but you haven't necessarily reduced the overall cost or increased the net profit.
So the challenge isn't technical at all, it's managerial. It requires executive discipline to prevent that micro-efficiency from becoming macro-consumption. The organization has to intentionally capture that saved capacity and then direct it toward those 10.3x revenue growth goals.
Exactly. The leaders have managerial processes in place to identify that freed up capacity and immediately reassign those resources to high-value projects. The laggards just let the saved capacity evaporate into increased consumption.
Now let's look at the budget allocation trends, which seem to reflect this definitive shift from experimentation to operational maturity.
The sources confirm a very distinct normalization trend. Budgets are aggressively shifting away from those discretionary innovation funds, the ephemeral pilot budgets, and into recurring core IT line items. This reflects a committed, long-term operational spend.
And the sheer volume of that spend is staggering. It reflects a consensus that AI is now a core utility, like electricity.
Absolutely. 92% of companies plan to increase their AI investment. And just look at the scale of it. The proportion of organizations spending over $100,000 per month on AI tools has more than doubled, leaping from 20% in 2024 to a staggering 45% in 2025.
Wow.
This shows that the initial skepticism has been replaced by committed, recurring operational expense across nearly half of the enterprises surveyed.
So where's all that money going? There seems to be a functional bias that completely aligns with that ceiling growth strategy we discussed.
There is a strong, distinct, and very telling bias toward revenue-generating functions. Sales and marketing capture approximately 70% of AI budget allocations.
70%.
It's a clear executive prioritization of top-line revenue generation. Things like lead scoring, hyper-personalized outreach, dynamic pricing, automated content generation over the back-end, administrative cost reduction functions like HR or basic IT support. The money is following the anticipated revenue return.
And for those few organizations that are attempting to escape the buy model and build their own custom solutions, the ones who feel their differentiation requires proprietary modeling, the barrier to entry is substantial.
It's a massive financial barrier, and it reinforces why the mid-market prefers MSPs. Developing a custom large-scale solution can cost anywhere between $500,000 and $5 million plus just for the initial build.
And that's not the total cost.
Not at all. And this is crucial. That's just the upfront cost. You have to factor in 15 to 25% annually for maintenance, infrastructure, compute, and the MLO staff to run it. This high cost is actually a natural defense mechanism against pilot purgatory. Because if you're spending millions, the scrutiny on the ROI before you even start is existential.
Finally, let's just touch on the fundamental driver underpinning all of this commitment, the cost of inaction.
This is the most compelling reason executives continue to fund AI, despite the high failure rates and the pilot purgatory chaos. The fear of obsolescence is what drives the spending.
And we see this quantified in the AI value gap.
Yes. Future-built companies are planning to spend 64% more of their IT budget on AI than the laggards are. The consensus in the C-suite is clear. The risk of underinvesting in AI is considered existential, while the risk of overinvesting is seen as manageable. You can pull back on a pilot, but you can't recover from being competitively obsolete in a market where your competitor can innovate 3 times faster than you can.
Okay, let's pivot now to the strategic architecture, the technical side underpinning these investments. The foundational debate that really dominated the early days, should we build our own LLMs or should we just buy access? That seems to have largely settled into a pragmatic compromise.
It has. The leaders have embraced it. It's what the sources are calling the pragmatic 80-20 buy versus tune consensus.
Okay, so the market has finally accepted that not everyone needs to be OpenAI. How are people applying this 80-20 rule?
The market has really converged on a clear hybrid model. For 80% of enterprise use cases, the strategy is straightforward.
Yeah.
You buy. This means accessing established secure SaaS platforms like Copilot, Salesforce Einstein, or using models as service offerings from the big cloud providers. This approach just delivers rapid time to value for commodity tasks.
So if it's summarizing an internal meeting transcript or drafting a first-pass job description, that's a commodity function and you just buy the service.
Exactly. But the remaining 20%, that's the differentiator layer.
That's the secret sauce.
That's the firm's secret sauce. The proprietary data, the highly regulated legal documents, the unique supply chain logistics, or that custom business logic. The strategy here isn't a full $5 million build, it's to tune. They take open-source foundation models like Llama or Mistral, and they fine-tune them on their secure, private, proprietary data, all within their own air-gapped environments.
And the operational reason for tuning is critical here, right? It's about maintaining a competitive advantage without that massive cost.
It maintains competitive advantage and it reduces risk. By using a private fine-tuned model, they can inject their corporate knowledge and their brand voice while maintaining complete control and security over their data. This lets them achieve highly specific, high-accuracy results for their core differentiating functions without the massive capital expenditure of training a foundational model from scratch.
This strategic decision leads directly to another key observation, that where the value actually resides is shifting. The model itself is rapidly becoming infrastructure, almost a background utility.
The analogy is perfect. The sources confirm that the model is now viewed as a commodity, like electricity for the cognitive age.
It's necessary, but it's not the differentiator.
Exactly. You can't operate without power, but it's not what makes you special. Everyone has access to high-quality power.
And so the true value movement has shifted away from the model layer and up into the application layer.
The true value now lies in the workflow integration, the domain-specific logic, and the intelligent user interface that wraps the model. You're not buying raw AI power anymore. You're buying a pre-integrated, reliable solution. And this is fueling the explosive growth of the AI app ecosystem.
So executives are prioritizing purchasing third-party AI applications that solve very specific vertical problems.
Right. Say an AI app that's specifically designed to review complex insurance policy language and flag compliance risks. They'd rather buy that than try to build the same capability from raw, difficult-to-manage APIs in-house. They just want outcomes delivered reliably on day one.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a little scary. The shift toward agentic AI. This is the new frontier, moving beyond passive chat to active, autonomous decision-making, planning, and tool execution.
This is the next phase of ambition for sure, and we're seeing rapid uptake despite the challenges. Over half of enterprises, 52%, were actively using or at least experimenting with AI agents as of late 2025.
The ambition is huge. Gartner predicts 33% of enterprise software will have agentic capabilities by 2028.
We're talking about agents that can receive a high-level goal like optimize our cloud spending and then autonomously execute a whole series of subtasks across multiple different software systems.
But this immense ambition comes with a pretty harsh reality check, and this feeds directly back into the pilot purgatory problem.
It's proving to be incredibly complex to scale reliably. Agents need to autonomously execute plans, make decisions, and reliably interact with existing, complex, and often temperamental software systems, all without human intervention. That orchestration is proving formidable.
Because if the agent fails at step 2 of a 10-step plan,
who monitors it? Who fixes it? Who takes responsibility for the error?
And what does that complexity mean for deployment success?
Well, Gartner predicts that because of this complexity and unreliability, over 40% of agentic AI projects will be canceled entirely by 2027. The failure rate for agents is higher because the stakes are so much higher.
A hallucination in a chatbot is embarrassing.
A hallucination in an autonomous agent that manages your financial transactions is catastrophic.
And finally, we have to issue a strong warning for you, the listener, about agent washing.
Oh, absolutely. Executives need to be skeptical. The term is being aggressively misused right now. We're seeing vendors rebranding basic automation scripts or standard workflow triggers, things that have been around for 2 decades as sophisticated agents just to capture those hot budget dollars.
So how do you spot it?
When you're assessing an agent solution, ask yourself, can it autonomously plan, self-correct, and use tools outside of its native environment?
Whoa.
Or is it just a glorified automated email sender? If it's the latter, you're just paying a premium for old technology with a new name.
Okay, we've established the technology works in the lab, but 95% of pilots fail when they hit the real world, the production environment. This means we have to spend significant time on the unglamorous, fundamental failures that are stalling all this progress. And that starts and ends with the data quality bottleneck.
The data quality bottleneck is, without a doubt, the #1 killer of GenAI initiatives. The sources are definitive on this. Pilots succeed because they run on these curated golden data sets, clean, perfect subsets of information carefully prepared by data scientists.
But when that model gets deployed to production,
It faces the entire unstructured repository, the messy SharePoint, the legacy Jira tickets, the forgotten network drives, the shared folders that nobody has audited in a decade.
the noise just overwhelms the signal. But for a non-technical executive listening, explain why this production data is so uniquely poisonous to GenAI models.
It's poisonous because of a total lack of governance, specifically around 3 issues: duplication, metadata, and context. GenAI models rely on retrieval-augmented generation, or AG, to ground their responses in truth. If your system contains 10 different versions of the same legal brief, or if the data is buried in proprietary formats with 0 metadata tags explaining what the document even is, the RAG system cannot reliably find the single source of truth.
So the model is forced to synthesize chaos.
Exactly. It's synthesizing chaotic, conflicting, or untagged inputs, and so it produces unreliable results, or worse, toxic hallucinations.
So what's the resulting statistic on data failure from this?
Gartner finds that a staggering 85% of AI projects fail due to poor data quality.
85%.
It is the primary structural flaw. Without data that is cleansed, deduplicated, and metadata tagged, in other words, AI-ready data, the models simply cannot retrieve the context they need to perform their function reliably in a production environment. The entire promise of GenAI is predicated on high-quality, accessible data.
And this issue is particularly acute given that GenAI's whole promise is to unlock value from unstructured text, the very type of data that is the messiest.
That's the irony in the confidence gap. Only 26% of chief data officers, the CDOs, are confident in their organization's ability to use unstructured data effectively.
That is a massive admission of vulnerability from the leadership level.
It is. It's an admission concerning the very thing GenAI is supposed to be solving. And that lack of confidence stops scale dead in its tracks.
This points not just to a data cleaning problem, but to a foundational infrastructure deficit.
Absolutely. 52% of organizations rate their data foundation's readiness for GenAI as inadequate. And this is driving massive, non-negotiable investment into data modernization.
And specifically, that means things like vector databases and RAG pipelines.
Right. Vector databases allow for that fast, context-based semantic search and robust RAG pipelines. This is not a trivial investment. This is the core infrastructure necessary to ensure the language model is talking to the correct, contextualized enterprise truth rather than just guessing.
Okay, so beyond the data itself, there's a failure in operationalizing the models, what the sources call the factory failure, the lack of MLOps. This is where the engineering discipline breaks down.
Successful AI implementation is not just about building a working model. It requires MLOps machine learning operations, which is an industrialized approach to software delivery, very similar to DevOps for traditional software. It's the factory that keeps the asset running reliably over time.
What's the primary issue here that leads to project failure?
Most firms treat AI as these artisanal one-off experiments. A data scientist builds a great model, validates it with a great data set, and then just throws it over the wall to the IT team to manage.
They lack the automated pipelines.
They completely lack the automated pipelines necessary for continuous testing, monitoring, and crucially, automated retraining of the model once it's live in the wild.
And that leads directly to the maintenance trap you mentioned. Models aren't static assets, they are degrading assets.
They degrade, and they degrade rapidly. This process is called data drift. It's what happens when the real-world data distributions change over time.
So if your model was trained on last year's customer behavior,
And a major competitor launches a new product, well, the customer behavior changes, and your model's accuracy drops significantly, sometimes overnight. Without MLOps infrastructure to detect that drift, alert the engineers, and automatically trigger retraining with new data, the application just fails silently.
and that silent failure is a direct driver of that 30% project abandonment rate we talked about.
It is. You build it, it works great for 3 months, and then, because the MLOps monitoring isn't in place, the model just becomes inaccurate, toxic, and unreliable over time. The business unit loses faith, the ROI disappears, and the project gets canceled. You must have that industrial factory process in place to ensure the model remains accurate and aligned with the constantly changing reality of your business.
Okay, we've hit on the technical and the infrastructural failures. Now we have to address the final and maybe the most intractable barrier, the human and organizational element. The sources make it so clear that the technology is often the easiest part of the equation. And this starts with organizational accountability and leadership, right at the very top.
The demand for financial accountability has led directly to the emergence of a new, essential executive role. By 2025, 35% of large enterprises are expected to have a chief AI officer or a CAIO.
So what is the true function of the CIO, and what kind of political friction do they face? I mean, they must sit right at the nexus of the CEO, the CIO, and all the business unit heads.
They're there to bridge that strategic gap and manage that political friction. The CIO usually reports to the CEO or the CIO and is responsible for strategy, governance, and crucially, ensuring that AI investments align with measurable P&L goals. They're the translator.
The translate.
Yes. They take the technical feasibility from the data science games. We can build a recommender model, and they translate it into measurable business value. This model will reduce churn by 3% in this specific market segment. They face friction because they have to enforce data standards and governance rules across what are often disparate business unit fiefdoms.
What about the mid-market then? They don't have the budget for a full-time, highly expensive C-level executive for this role.
The mid-market has strategically adopted what's called the fractional CAO model. These are independent executives who provide high-level strategy, governance, vendor selection guidance, and implementation road mapping on a retainer or a contracted basis.
Which allows them to get the strategic maturity without the full-time cost.
Exactly. It helps them avoid the costly mistakes, like pilot purgatory, without the full-time overhead. It is a very smart way for them to punch above their weight class.
Let's discuss the critical issues of talent and training. The skills shortage isn't just a bottleneck, it's a major constraint on velocity for 42% of organizations.
Yeah, 42% of organizations cite inadequate GenAI expertise as a top challenge. And this isn't just a shortage of the core data scientists who build the models. It's a multifaceted shortage.
What does that include?
It includes AI engineers, the developers who know how to build reliable, scalable MLOps pipelines and applications around the models. And it includes business translators.
And the translators are the ones who can identify viable, high ROI use cases.
And articulate the complex technical needs to the business side. If you don't have the translators, the business won't know what to ask for, and the engineers won't know what to build.
And despite these high adoption rates, there's a really serious training deficit that poses both a financial and a security risk.
It's an astounding managerial failure. 50% of employees using AI receive no formal training whatsoever.
Half of them.
Half. And this leads to two major compounding problems. First, a high risk of misuse and security breaches. Employees inputting proprietary or sensitive data into public non-secure models. And second, just grossly inefficient usage patterns. They're barely scratching the surface of the tool's true potential, which ensures that the 2.5 hours saved per day never actually aggregates to macro value.
Finally, we come back to the core cultural resistance, which is summarized by this powerful 10-20-70 rule. This seems to be the ultimate determinant of success or failure.
This rule posits that true AI success is only 10% algorithms, 20% technology, and a massive 70% business transformation and change management.
70%.
Laggards try to overlay sophisticated AI onto their broken analog bureaucratic processes. And they fail because the process itself is the problem. Leaders, on the other hand, use AI not as an automation tool, but as a catalyst to completely redesign and rethink the process itself, cutting out all the bureaucratic waste.
And that requires significant change management, employee retraining, and just cultural courage from the executive team to kill old processes entirely.
You got it.
Looking ahead, how do the sources suggest this technology will evolve as we move into 2026? What should you, the listener, be anticipating next?
The whole outlook is focused on accountable acceleration and governance. We are definitely heading for the AI audit era, where every single project has to justify its existence and its security profile. And the dominant form factor will shift rapidly from the visible chatbot, that separate application you have to go visit, to the invisible workflow.
So AI moves into the background.
It becomes an integrated, silent, powerful feature of the standard enterprise software you already use, like your ERP and CRM systems.
And with the rise of these autonomous agents, governance is about to become the absolute paramount imperative.
Governance is central because agents operate with such high risk. Organizations will have to implement defined human-in-the-loop protocols to manage the risks that come with autonomous decision-making and tool execution.
And we'll see new tooling to manage that complexity.
For sure. We'll see the emergence of AI control towers, these centralized dashboards that can monitor the actions, the costs, the decisions, and the security postures of all the AI agents across the enterprise, just to ensure they don't go rogue or hallucinate or accidentally bankrupt the budget. Management will need visibility into every single autonomous action that's taken.
Okay, let's synthesize this comprehensive look at the 2025 AI reality for the listener. This deep dive into the operational reality of GenAI in 2025 delivers a powerful and, I think, very clear message that should guide strategic decisions for the next fiscal year. The technology is mature, it is ready for scaling. The organization, in the vast majority of cases, is absolutely not ready to handle the infrastructure and the change management that's required.
And the core prescription we found in all the material is that differentiation is not in choosing the model. That's rapidly becoming a commodity that's available to everyone. Differentiation lies in the mastery of the data, the industrialization of the delivery process, that's MLOps, and the managerial courage to change the business process itself.
So the gap between that 6% of high-impact leaders and the 94% of followers, it's not a technical deficit. It's managerial and it's infrastructural. Escaping pilot purgatory, moving from 95% failure to high ROI success, it requires the hard, unglamorous work. Fixing the data quality, investing in the vector databases and MLOps infrastructure, and fundamentally upskilling the workforce to embrace the kind of change demanded by that 10-20-70 rule.
That is the difference between surviving the earning phase and actually thriving in it.
Perfect summary.
And if we connect this whole analysis to the bigger picture, to the economic reality, it raises the ultimate strategic question for you, the listener, to consider as you plan your 2026 budget. We noted that only 39% of organizations report any enterprise-level financial impact, even those that are claiming high usage. So given the Jevons paradox is the greatest future risk, not technical failure, but achieving individual productivity gains, your employees save 2.5 hours a day, that simply increase your organization's consumption of resources, rather than achieving true enterprise-wide macro-financial transformation. How do you ensure your micro-efficiency aggregates into measurable macro value for the P&L? That is the strategic challenge that separates the elite 6% from everyone else.